to the Developing Your Football World podcast with the British Football Coaches Network. Our guest on this episode is Paul Robinson. No, not that Paul Robinson. No, not that Paul Robinson either. Paul is a UEFA B coach who has done his youth award, worked in RTCs, American soccer camps, and has recently written a book. Enjoy.
Paul, good evening. Thank you for coming on. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm not bad, Will. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, and I'm really excited to talk to you. Now, for those that have seen this written down, that we've got Paul Robinson on, let's just clarify. You're not the Paul Robinson that played for England, and you're not the one that played for Millwall. Anyone who's watching YouTube can probably tell, but just for those listening, you're a different Paul Robinson, although it's a great footballing name.
Yes, a different Paul Robinson. It is quite a famous name in football, and there's quite a few of them over for the last sort of couple of decades at least.
So my dad is called Paul Wilson, and we would see on Gillette Soccer Saturday growing up, about 3 or 4 Paul Wilsons on any given Saturday would score a goal or two. And, oh, look, Dad, it's you. So, sorry to go off on, but do you get that a lot from people?
Not so much anymore, but it was more a thing when Paul Robinson was playing in goal for England. The obvious jokes were made at that point. Since that's not really happened in the last few years, it tends not to happen anymore.
Yeah, you make a good point. I doubt kids would know who the legend England #1 is. But tell us, where are you now? What's your current coaching role?
So at the minute, I'm based in Stockton. I coach a few different teams. So that's like under 9 through to under 15. That's with a grassroots team and also with an RTC or regional talent centre.
Wonderful. Now, you've written a book and we'll come to that, but I've got a list of questions here and we'll get through them. But as I said before we came on, we've got lots of areas that we can talk about, and I'm going to ask you loads of coaching questions. Let's start at the beginning. Mm-hmm. What was it that got you into coaching?
More chance than anything else. So I started on an American summer camp, and basically the camp that I went to didn't specialise in any sort of aspect or any topic, and counsellors could pretty much run any programme that they wanted to do, as long as I could get enough kids to go along with it. So it basically meant pitching like what your activities were. If enough people signed up, then you would run for like that week, and then the next week would start over again, and you were trying to keep like getting people on board with it. So you had to keep coming up with new ideas. And I think my sort of unique skill set amongst the counsellors was more down the sports route, which is why I've pretty much started offering sports programs to try and get kids involved in that and to give them that option alongside the other topics that were like open to them. So it was that really got me into coaching, that initial experience, in this foreign country, like in America, like first time there, and trying to get kids on board with playing football amongst other sports, and trying to keep it fun and engaging for them. And it was just that experience and seeing the sort of difference you could make to people, and through that inspired me to get involved in coaching more. So I come back from America and started doing the like coaching badges to try and learn more about coaching, because I wanted to get even better at it and progress. And yeah, that was it. Just kept flying from there.
Where were you based in the US?
It was in Maine, so like northeast.
Yeah, small place, isn't it? Just near up beyond Massachusetts, that part of the country. How many times have you been over there to work?
I worked over there on 3 consecutive summers.
For the same company?
Yes, same company, same camp. While I was there, I managed to set up like a camp competition between a couple of different camps in that area, so that we could go and play football or soccer as they called it, and test them against the other camps. So that was quite an experience, and giving the kids an experience of that sort of competitive play as well. Not all of them actually played for a team.
So America is a very popular place for coaches to go. So we have a lot of coaches who come on here who talk about it, but I'm interested in what your observations were on American sporting culture and what you felt when you try to work with some of the kids. If you're teaching them our football, the real football, what did you see about the level of engagement, the level of ability? What did you see and experience over there?
I found the level of engagement was really good. Even like some of the programs weren't just football; it was like multi-sports as well. Which any sport that I brought out for them and gave a try to, were all very keen and very eager to give it a go, which was fantastic. And then in terms of ability, like very mixed. So there was some of the players there who were like supposed to be playing like nationals, quite athletic, and then you had others where they never sort of played football before, or maybe not done any sport competitively before and just fancied giving it a try. So quite a large range, and again, just sort of like in England, like some of them would learn faster than others. Just it is basically like the child development that you're used to seeing in England, at least in my experience.
So how challenging was it for you? You got a whole bunch of kids of different abilities, different experiences, and if you're on camp, you're with them all the time. I regularly use this as an example. My last job in a school, I had a boy who was in Bournemouth's academy, and he was in the same PE lesson as kids that just hated sweating, they hated running, they hated being outdoors and being active. The kid from Bournemouth could do anything you asked them to, any sport, any activity, any technique, you could just do it. Whereas others, you almost had to beg them to participate. So how do you manage keeping all of the kids engaged and kind of pitching it at a level which is appropriate for the range of abilities within your session?
So I think in terms of like catering to the individuals, there's a few different sort of techniques that I like to use. So one is you go into like a smaller group game as possible, and so you get people involved more often, and that way you can sort of cater for groups, so you can make sure that like for more able or more technically proficient players get to play in like a smaller area, or playing against like other like technically proficient players to try and challenge them, where some of the beginners can play in like a large area to give them that little bit more time on the ball to make that decision, playing against other inexperienced players, so that it's sort of a suitable challenge for them. Likewise, you can use sort of explicit challenges to players, try to do this or try to do that. Can you do something, like depending on what you're working on, sometimes you can buddy them up, so you got a more experienced with a less experienced player, and you can say try and help the less experienced player, like don't just try and do it on your own. Can you use this player to play with and give them an opportunity? And if they're not able to do it, then you've got an opportunity to go and practice defending, try and do your skills past them, like learn a new skill. And then they may not get the success that they're used to getting because they're trying something different, or, they're trying to use their other foot a little bit more often. And that way every player's able to get something out of that practice.
Before we come back this side of the pond, I'd like to ask you about how you adjusted to American culture, because we obviously have a lot of overlap. We are the cousins across the pond, but there's a fair few differences, and particularly in the last 5-6 years, I think some of those differences have been quite stark. So, how was your lived experience of living in America?
Mm. Well, working on the summer camp, it was sort of quite sheltered. So you didn't so much get the full like American experience. It was like its own little community, like not really integrated in the towns and that. So you didn't get the exposure to like how they are with their other sports and how fanatical they can be with that, or any other parts of American life that is a little bit atypical to life in England. Um, so that sort of distorted the experience like a little bit in terms of that culture shock, because it was something unique, and sort of the campers, like the players and that, they sort of helped sort of by adapting to me, and helping me fit in like that. So yeah, that was part of it. And then, I did get a chance to like travel around America and explore around it like that. At which point I've already made like American friends at camp, and they're like showing me around the parts of America that they know and that they like. So I've got someone there to sort of introduce me to it, and sort of made the experience a little bit more gentler than what like other people experiencing it might be.
They are very, very friendly and very welcoming people, aren't they? There are people in the US that you'll stay in contact for the rest of your life, and they will take an interest in you. I think a lot of them, it's a novelty factor as well. They're actually, some of them can live such sheltered lives that they've not really met anyone who's different before, who's outside their bubble, and you come over with a funny accent, and it can honestly make their day that they've talked to someone who doesn't sound like them.
Yeah, you're right with that.
So we'll come back over to England then, and you have been working in RTC, and you've also been working in women's football as well. Let's go down the women's football route to start off with. Development team coach, reserve team assistant coach, under 16 coach as well. These different roles. Was this your first experience within women's football?
It was, yeah. And then like it was like all three like at the same time. So sort of thrown in at the deep end a little bit with it.
So what differences did you notice from the male game from your perspective?
It's quite a difficult question to answer. So you get your like cliches or the stereotypical things that are supposed to be there, like supposed to be for differences in terms of girls or women are supposed to ask more questions than the boys. The boys sort of just want to crack on with it, and whatever you say, they'll just like, right, let's go. Where the girls sort of ask loads of questions and want to understand it like on a deeper level, getting all the tactics and understanding like why you want to do it that way and why that's the best way to do it. Which I've found that's not necessarily the case. Like it's possibly more often than what happens in the boys. You certainly get a few of them keen to ask questions, but again, there's quite a large number of them who do just want to crack on with it. I think the biggest difference is more in terms of the way that they play the game, which it seems strange because it's football at the end of the day, and there's two teams and two goals and one ball, and it's directional. It's like the exact same game, but just the way that their decision making's sort of affected by their own affordances, like their own like personal limitations in terms of like the physicality. So that changes the way that they view the game, and then that changes the way they play the game and what you see happening on the pitch. So I think turning and receiving is very different in the women's game compared to the men's game, or at least with the players that I've worked with. I think you see this is possibly down to the physical differences in terms of like the way the hip gait is slightly different in sort of women to men, which affects the way that they can like open their hips up as they receive the ball, and then that changes which angle they can then play at. So they've got them slightly different sort of options. Also, like the range of vision's a little bit different, where men tend to have better long distance vision and not so much short distance vision, and women it's vice versa. So you get like a lot of men pinging like for long balls and looking to play along, where a lot of the girls innately want to play them short passes because that's the passes that they can see, and that's their like physical affordances that's affecting that. So I think it's that aspect of the game that's the biggest difference.
I've also heard lots of social explanations for differences when it comes to, like you're talking about long passes and short passes, in that for female players it's often more about a collective. And so some of them, the old cliches, and I want to avoid using cliches, but I think it's apt here, is that you get less players that take the ball by the horns and take the selfish shots and go on the dribble, compared to some of the male players who just do it far too much. And so what I've been told by a lot of girls, even 12-year-old girls, would say, I didn't take that shot because I thought they'd think I was greedy if I did it. And so they would avoid taking a high reward shot and play a slightly lesser reward pass to someone else who might be in an inferior position, because they didn't want to be seen as being greedy. And I can only speculate, but I believe that to be entirely societal, a construct of what we place on them from societal expectations. But like you said, it does, for all intents and purposes, appear a different sport. And I've got my players for me have been telling me for years, when you get the idiots on Twitter making their comments about irons and kitchens and sandwiches, they say, look, women's football isn't inferior, it's a different sport because of those constraints that you mentioned, and that the two can be admired side by side, rather than holding men as the standard and saying men are up here and women need to get to here. It's like, well, men, the average male body and the average female body are different, and it doesn't mean that women's football is inferior. Personally, I believe that men's football might be at its ceiling. I think we're at the absolute peak of what we can get from players, but due to the long-standing discrimination within female sport, I don't think we're anywhere near the peak of how good female footballers can be. And hopefully we can change that in the near future. So
yeah, but I think there's definitely a lot of potential in terms of developing the women's game. As you say, that I think there's a lot that can be achieved. The more sort of focus or resources that's made available to it, and just as how we've seen the men's game progress quite a lot in just like the last 20 years, women's football can still make that journey. Like they're not coming in right at the top part of their like development. Like there's still a way to go. The same way that we'll still see the men's game progress. If you'd have said like 20 years ago that the men's game is pretty much at its peak, you'd have probably believed it. You'd have thought, oh yeah, like I can't see how we're going to get any better. Like it's a person with a ball, like they can't do that much different. And in essence they can't. Like it's still the same game. Even some of the like tactical revolutions that we're seeing now, it's all been done before. It might be that it had a different name or it didn't have a name at the time when it was doing it. Like we might talk about a false nine now, dropping deep to get onto the ball. Well, that happened in Sunday League football as well. You never called it a false nine. You maybe call it someone being greedy and or wanting to like just roam everywhere and be involved in the game. You know, like it wasn't like a shrewd tactical plan. It's just someone wanting to be involved more. So yeah, like all of these things, it's nothing new. You know, like squeezing up, you know, playing a high line, or using a low block. You know, they've all been done over the years. Inverted fullbacks were done before Pep made them a lot more common, you know, in the last 3 or 4 years, you know, at City. So, you know, it's all been done. It's just been done slightly different, and certainly much faster. You know, if you're looking at a lot of the stats, you know, how fast players can run now and how much distance is covered within a game, how many passes are made in a game. You know, all of these are going up and they keep increasing. So I think, you know, we're still yet to see some improvement. You know, it may not be as drastic, but I still think it's there. I mean, for women's game, just running parallel, and again, like it's going to just keep coming on and improving and improving.
Are you still involved in women's football?
I am, yeah. So I'm still coaching girls teams, like in the grassroots, and the RTC is like just a girls team.
Do you think that coaching both male and female players has made you a more well-rounded coach, and have you kind of developed any transferable skills? Like, for instance, with female players, I found, because not everyone, but there are more that do want that discussion, that a coaching point almost becomes exploratory, whereas with boys, many of them do just want to be told what to do so they can get on with it. So what have you found that transfers for you?
So I think because coaching is fundamentally like, or maybe not fundamentally, but a big part of it is the social aspect of it. You know, it's your interpersonal skills. It's how well you can get on with people. At which point I think the wider range of experience you get and interacting with different types of personalities, it's always going to be advantageous and, you know, give you, you know, that wider sort of scope of like a background to draw on, and, you know, different things to try, different things that you remember might have worked with one person, might work with someone else, or it didn't work, and you sort of know maybe not to use that one because it wasn't very effective. So you've always got that like overlap, even though like you do have the different personalities, but you get different personalities in any walk of life with any range of people. So I think that helps. Other than that, I think you get the overlap of, you know, it's still coaching, like whether you're coaching boys or girls. So like the attention to detail and seeing like what the coaching points are and what the intervention strategies might be. You know, how you can help the different players achieve. You know, it can transfer quite easily from like a boys team to a girls team, and then just slight tweaks based on the affordances available for the different players.
Now, currently you also work in a regional talent club for boys.
For girls.
For girls, sorry.
Girls,
sorry,
yeah.
I thought that was boys. That's my fault there. But all right, so who is that for?
So the RTCs, it's part of like the girls football pyramid in terms of progression. So at the bottom of it, you've got your like grassroots teams, and then you've got the RTCs, which is basically the female equivalent of a football academy that like a professional boys team would run. And then above that, in that pyramid, you've got your national camps. So it'd be for best players sort of invited to go and train on these national selection camps and talent ID camps to see who might be able to go on and represent the national team in them youth age groups.
What kind of barriers are you witnessing for young girls that are maybe on the cusp of making it into high-level senior football? that perhaps is holding them back from being able to go all in.
Do you mean in terms of their like technical ability, or in terms of like social challenges that might sort of prohibit them?
Well, a bit of both, really, because I've seen over the years loads and loads of boys who are quite good and they're nearly there, and their parents almost put everything into it. I hear a lot more mums and dads with girls at 15 to 16 say she can't come to training this week, she's got GCSEs. Whereas with boys, I see a lot more that actually neglect the studies and do extra training to try and make it.
So I think in that respect, I've not seen much like GCSEs like coming in the way too much. They'll miss the occasional session because they've got like a revision session on, or it's their options evening or some other event going on at school. So they'll miss the occasional training session, but it doesn't like happen to everyone all at once. So you'll miss a few players from this session, but you might have missed a couple on any week anyway due to just illness or something like that. Another sort of barrier to it, or potential barrier, it's the social side of it. You get a lot of players wanting to go to the friends' parties, or wanting to go and watch a movie, or go to a concert, and in a way, like, it's sort of understandable. Like, for only young ones, I've got other passions and interests, and missing the occasional session to do these things that we may not get a chance to do another time. It's all part of their life, and I don't think that's necessarily going to stop them from getting into the very, very top, because they've missed like one or two sessions throughout like a season. It's not something that happens regularly. I think the biggest barrier would be like maybe a lack of opportunity, because there's not that many RTCs. And although you don't need to play for an RTC in order to get invited to a national camp, it certainly helps. For like a national talent scout to happen to go to this grassroots game and to look for a key player and see how she's sort of faring against other grassroots players, I think that might make it difficult for them to be identified as a player with talent. Whereas at an RTC, where you're playing against other good players and other players who the national sort of scouting network are aware of, if you turn up on that game and you catch their eye, then you've got that opportunity. So the biggest restriction is that initial opportunity, because as I said, there's not that many teams like in the girls' football compared to how many like professional academies you get in the boys' football. The distance between them, so you might have to travel quite far. In some of the RTCs where I've worked, some players that have travelled for like 90 minutes, 2 hours of that, just to get to training or just to play a game. So they certainly spend more time commuting than what they do on the actual training pitch. So that's a big barrier. And then, the sort of barriers to just getting that travel, like, can you drive? What about your parents' work commitments in order to get you there? So there's possibly a lot of talent who just never gets identified because of that like barrier that's in the way.
Yeah, I think that is a big thing. It's there's a lot of small differences, but I believe it all adds up. And if you're having to drive, if a girl has to drive half an hour longer than a boy, you're going to say, oh, it's only half an hour, but it's half an hour several times a week. It's half an hour there, it's half an hour back. And especially now with the price of fuel just going through the roof, I don't want to go out in the car at all anymore because it's getting that bad. But there was something you said about skipping parties, made me think of some boys at 15 or 16, if they had a party they were invited to and couldn't make it because of football. It almost felt like a badge of honor. Sorry, lads, can't come out this weekend. Got football. This is a reminder. But I'm starting to see that with some players, and it's more the level of hunger and desire. I've worked with lots of girls many years ago in the past that were just in RTC or academy type teams because they were good. Maybe they developed early and they didn't really care that much about continuing down a football pathway, which is really cool to wear nice tracksuits and go to the good games. But now I'm starting to see there's a lot more motivated, committed, driven girls than ever before. And I think this will only pay off in the long run for us as a nation, because a really good, exciting future if we can get our act together. Now, let's ask you a couple of these ones about you yourself. What's the best coaching experience you've had that has enhanced your coaching ability?
Oh, I think it's probably got to be working on the summer camps in America, just because you get to deliver like so many sessions in a very short space of time that you don't always get like in your regular season, like working with your team, where you might get them like once or twice a week. So I think that definitely helps. And then the range of personalities and the range of ability levels that you get on them summer camps as well gives a very wide scope in order to like learn from. Whereas when you're working with the same players every week and you sort of know what the strengths are and what the weaknesses are and like how you want it to fit together, and it sort of becomes a little bit stale in terms like it's not it's challenging but in a different way. It's challenging, and how do you get the most out of them, and how do you keep the motivation up throughout the season? How do you like change things up regularly enough to keep it interesting, but like not just throwing loads of new stuff at them where they never get to like take any of it on board, and you just going through it for like the sake of it almost. So you've got like them different challenges, but I think the one that's like most beneficial to like help kickstart you and get you like as knowledgeable as possible in a short range of time. It's just being on the grass as much as possible, delivering, at which point them summer camps definitely help.
And that's something that's been echoed on here a lot, and it's a message I keep wanting to repeat to people. How do I get better at coaching? Well, you've got to coach more. That's a huge part of it. Opportunities in the US, like you said, it allows you to do that. New personalities each week, new ability levels each week, several sessions per day. Sometimes here you can work with the same group over a long period of time, and it does feel a bit stale. Maybe you can go on autopilot. I suppose that's the challenge in itself, and how do you stay focused? But over there, I'd find that if you're doing 3, 4, 5 sessions a day, you might have one bad one, but you wouldn't dwell on it because you then got another session to make up for it. Whereas here, if you're doing only a couple a week, sometimes that, not even a bad session, just a bad exercise within a session, I mean, you got 9/10 of it right. That one thing was not. So it's really good for keeping you sharp on your toes. So that's a coaching experience. Let's ask the same question, but for formal education experience. Has there been a course? Has there been something you've done in coaching education that has best prepared or enhanced your coaching ability?
So I think there's certainly merit in all of the courses that I've done. I've always came away knowing something from it. I think it's difficult to pinpoint one of them as being the most influential, just because there's a different course focused on a different thing. So I find it difficult to rank one of them like above the other, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Are there any standout courses?
So not so much courses, because you do your typical coaching license ones, your level 2 or your youth awards, your UEFA, them sort of ones where like you get something different from each of them, and it keeps progressing you. So you like when I did it for the level 2 was like very technically focused and attention to detail and making sure that you could coach and different intervention strategies and that sort of thing. And for youth awards, like trying to keep everyone engaged, trying to keep the game flowing, sort of more flybys than you stop stand still. So not so much like your larger picture stuff, but working with the individuals. And then for UEFA, where it becomes a bit more, can you make it match like, how can it transfer to the game more? So like it's not just like a rondo with no direction, like you want to try and add the direction into it, to like progress like that. So like there's key messages in all of them, and then you do like other bits. I think the more sort of informative bits I've done, I haven't really been courses, but it's been listening to podcasts like this one, or like little webinars, or talking to another coach. I think they've been like the most informative, because it's not the same sort of pathway that every other coach in the country has followed. For you do get different tutors and different styles of delivering that. It's all like basically the same curriculum, where when you go and you listen to these sort of podcasts and you learn from other people's experiences and you watch webinars, that's when it's more catered to what area that you're interested in, or what opportunities that you've managed to stumble across. So I think that's possibly the best bit of advice in terms of like if you're wanting to find like a course or something, like go down these rabbit holes and listen to like other people and see what like piques your interest, and follow that down further, like find some research articles about and try to learn more about the topic like that. And it's that sort of specialty in terms of what it is that you're interested in that'll make you unique and help you develop in the area that you want to. And we're all shaped by our own experiences, so maybe it's a place that you're working with that makes you interested in this certain topic, you wanting to help this group of players.
You're right, there are so many good opportunities for coaches to learn informally these days. So I'd rather, quite fortunate to be a coach now than many years ago in the past, because you can almost learn passively. Put on a podcast or an audio book when you're ready to session, or watch a webinar when doing some cardio in the gym, just basic stuff like that. You just keep the learning coming. And because coaching has got so many different avenues you can go down, so many career paths, when we first start out, it's often hard. I mean, you hear a lot of young coaches about 16, 17, so I want to go coach in the Premier League. Great, it would be brilliant if you can, and full credit to you if you're able to, but that's for the 0.1%. What else is there? What else would you like to do? And to be honest, that might not be the thing you want to do in 10 years' time. I've been coaching for close to 14 years now, and I have a very clear idea now of what I want to do compared to when I first started. When I first started, it was kind of, I don't know, let's see how this goes and see where it takes me. So on that, what are your ambitions for coaching? Where do you want to go? What do you want to experience along the way?
Put me on the spot there. Well, basically, I think when I first started out and still now, like I've sort of thought I want to be like involved in football like full time. I didn't really know like all the different roles like being a coach entailed sort of starting out, you know, and certainly I think some of the roles didn't exist when I started coaching, where now you get like throwing specialists or set piece specialists, which has come in the last few years. So like these sort of roles are constantly evolving. The role of like an analyst has certainly grown in significance, and the amount of input that an analyst can have in coming up with tactical plans has evolved as well. And then you get like, you know, other aspects of coaching, like, you know, in possession, out of possession, transition. Took a big focus a few years back, strength and conditioning, and trying to tie it into like the football aspects of it. You know, like not just in the gym, they've all got their own like aspects to it. So I think I've still got that initial sort of dream of wanting to work in football full time, and I'm very open to the like many different opportunities that might entail. Like I've still not sort of found like a sort of specialty where like it's that I want to do and nothing else. You know, I'm still venturing down some of the rabbit holes in all the different sort of fields here.
So where do you think your strengths lie?
I think it depends on what team that I'm working with, and you know, which coaching staff that I'm working with. I find it in the grassroots. I quite like working with like younger players, that sort of youth aspect to it, and you know, getting the fundamentals and you know that basic technique and making it fun for them and keeping it enjoyable. And that's sort of where I find myself in that grassroots team, like trying to keep everyone involved, trying to you know, positive reinforcement where I can, like that sort of thing. And when I'm in the RTC environment, I find myself more drawn towards the tactical side of it, and sort of understanding what's happening on the pitch and being able to provide insights as to what's happening and how that can sort of be fixed. And I think that comes down to like the players that you're working with and what affordances that gives you, and also what other coaches you're working alongside and who can specialize in what and who adds value in like what place, and you know, just how you work as a team. So I find myself in different roles depending in which sort of environment I'm in.
So what kind of roles are you looking at to get into next to take you further on this journey?
I think an ideal role would be maybe to go like into like a football academy, you know, like one of the sort of professional ones, and doesn't need to be like Premier League, you know, somewhere that'll give you like that full time, a bit more contact time with players, you know, sort of good resources in terms that the club can provide to help put on like the best sessions possible, like without the pitch getting rained off every other week.
Oh yeah. So let's take a big step out and look at the state of things from a bird's eye view from above.
Mm-hmm.
What changes would you implement into the way football is done in England?
So I'd like to see smaller game formats for longer, in the youth ages. I think at the minute there's a bit of a race to get to 11 aside.
Yeah.
That parents are very keen for. Some players are keen for. Clubs are definitely keen for it. Like you know, if you suggest playing like friendly games, but like in a smaller format than what their age group's supposed to. Like, you don't get that many takers, and I think we're missing out on a lot of development opportunities by rushing through to that larger format. So that's something that I'd definitely like to see sort of come in.
Yeah, for me, I've been saying this for years, and Germany, they must have been copying my ideas because they've just recently changed how they're going to do it. But age -4, 11-year-olds should be playing 7v7, and damn it, that's my idea on it. Summer season and more futsal in the winter, where the weather's crap, and if we get an inconsistent run of games, let's just go inside for a couple of months and use this tool to help develop our players better. But let's now move on to, you've written a book. What's it called?
It's called The Soccer Sessions Book, 87 prepared sessions. That's something like that on the tagline. Was
it just yourself that wrote this?
It was, yeah.
And how long did it take you?
So it sort of evolved. So I didn't sort of plan to write a book. So it started as basically a collection of sessions where basically I'd plan all my sessions out and usually be on little scraps of paper. And then, the paper would end up getting tatty because I'd folded it up and put it in my pocket, and the ink might run if it rained and stuff like that. And a lot of shorthand notes. So when I referred back to it a few months later, sometimes I couldn't quite remember exactly what I'd meant. And then I decided I'd do it electronically, and then at least I'd always have a copy, without the paper going tatty or getting ripped or anything like that. And then I'd always have something to refer back to. So I did that based around like the FA Youth Award sessions, like keeping everyone involved and, trying to do flyby like interventions. So I had like questions and challenges prepared for each session as well, for like how I might challenge like certain individuals within the group, or how I might challenge the entire group to like come up with a solution together to work on the theme for that sort of session. So that bit was like how it started out. So I had this collection of sessions, and then I thought these sessions might be useful to other coaches, because on the coaching courses that I've been on and the informal learning, I'd heard a lot of coaches say, I just want to know I'm doing a good session, or that the session's right. Like, I'm confident in my ability to deliver it on the grass, but like I'd like loads of good sessions and to learn more about putting these sessions on. So I thought, well, if these might be useful to others, then let's put them together in a book, and then these sort of coaches always have something to refer back to. And also, it's quite a common problem for a lot of coaches getting the time to plan the session and then deliver it and review it. So if you've got a collection of sessions that you can refer to all the time, and it sort of takes that planning process out of it, then that's where I'm adding value to like the coaching community. And then it evolved from there. So I discussed it with my uncle. He's got no involvement in football, no interest in football, and I always thought, if he can understand the session, like one of these things that I put on, and he'd feel confident delivering it, then like I've achieved my purpose, where like a coach can turn up, have a look at this session, and run it from that page, without needing to go hunting down different resources or spend a lot of time scratching my head trying to plan it and keep it consistent. So you are working on a theme. And it was with these conversations with my uncle where he sort of pointed out, like, what am I adding to it so that like a novice coach, an inexperienced coach, or someone who's not had enough time to like plan the session knows what they're looking for and knows what the answers are to some of the questions, or knows what response should happen to the challenges that I'm setting. Like, how do I know if the players are succeeding, and tips on like how the coach can deliver the session as well. At which point the sessions then evolve, so it's now got some coaching guidelines to help give some sort of background onto how you can best deliver the session, and little tips with behavior management, and how you set up the session and how you make sure like everything's safe, and minimizing disruption so that you increase that ball rolling time. And then it's got like the sort of answers and tactical detail that accompany each session, so that the coach can like read through it and feel confident in the knowledge of the topic from the very first time that they've delivered it. And throughout the process of like adding these parts to the book, I've started mentoring other coaches. So like, inexperienced coaches or coaches who just needed like a bit of a hand or struggling with certain aspects. And I'd work with them to help them like sort of progress. And I noticed that there was like a few common faults that coaches were making, or just things that like common questions that like everyone asked, or a lot of people asked. So that just helped add to the book, where it's like, if people are needing this information, like I'll put it in this book, so it's like one resource with like everything in it, so they don't have to go looking around for like all these different things and try and put them together.
So who is the book aimed at? What level of player, what age?
So the book is aimed for players age 10 and up. So as long as the players are playing sort of under 10, under 11, they'll be able to do like just about every single session in that book. And then, obviously, like it can't be a one size fits all, because every team's different. So you might have to use like your own sort of judgment as to the players that you're working with, like if this session's appropriate. But like the majority of them sessions will work for players age 10 and older. So like even in the like adult sort of game, if you're working with men or women, you can still use these sessions, because it's all got the components of football. You're receiving, releasing, running with the ball, sort of aspects to it.
And what kind of topics do you cover in there?
So the book's broke into several sections. So there's one of it which is basically the basics. So that's got how to create space, short passing, long passing, running with the ball, dribbling in small spaces, dribbling in large spaces, combination play, all of them sort of things that like everyone needs. Or turning as well is another one. And then there's a specific section on defending, so that breaks the defending down into different topics, like defending wide areas, defending deep, pressing from the front, working as a pair, like how to keep compact, all of them sort of things. And then it's got a session based on transition. So that's your positive and negative transition. So like your counter attacks or your transition to defend. And then there's the attacking aspect of it. So in possession, so support play, combination play. And then there's a section on shooting. So you got like loads of just shooting sessions.
How's the reception been to it so far?
I've had some good reviews from it. Got about 5 stars rating, I think, on Amazon. The coaches that I spoke to about it have said that it's great, and the players that benefit from the sessions, save them loads of time, and they're seeing like a big improvement with their players because of like the increased ball rolling time that they're getting, and the improvement in how they're able to deliver that session and how confident they feel with their knowledge because of this like technical, tactical detail that accompanies session plans.
Well, very good. So it's on Amazon, and just remind us of the name of it one more time.
It's the Soccer Sessions book. It's also available in other retailers like WH Smith's and Waterstones. And I think it might be on Book Depository. It's available globally as well, so like you can get it. Like Amazon's a big one for the global market, but yeah, like it is available in loads of countries.
Do you plan to write another one?
I'm thinking about it. You know, even with that, while the first one was like going through the publishing process and going through the print, I've kept evolving, like as a coach and learning more stuff and coming up with new ideas. So I've got a couple of ideas on what I might do for future books. So I'm just sort of playing around with it at the moment.
Now, every coach, whatever they come up with, is always going to be kind of directed by their philosophy. So tell us about yours. What are your coaching beliefs and your expectations for what a session should contain?
So, they're very difficult. Good question. So I think my big belief is that the sessions need to be fun, because you need your players to enjoy them, because you want them to keep coming back, because they're not going to get better if they're not coming back. So then my beliefs on how do you do that, well, clearly for sessions need to be football related. Like, it's not good having a fun session, but like you've not done anything football related, because like they'll keep coming back, but they're not going to improve. And then I think you need to keep every player involved at all times. You know, it's not fun for them if you've got subs, or if you've got a team sitting out, or players standing on the sideline and waiting for the turn. Which is and one of the things that I thought was important to include in the book. So for every single session, or at least for ones that are more complicated, I've included like guidance notes for how you would run that session with different numbers of players, so that, you know, if you've only got 10 turn up, you can run it. You know, you're not saying, oh, well, the session requires 13, so now I can't. So that these sessions are adaptable. I think coaches need to be able to adapt to make sure that you do keep everyone involved in that session. That's a way to keep the sessions fun. Increase ball rolling time, so the amount of time that the ball's in play and that the players are engaged in the activity. So I try to set up the areas like within each other, and that way, you know, you can do as much as possible without needing to move that many corners, because I know from experience, like sometimes you don't have a lot of space in order to plan your sessions, or you may not have enough resources to plan the sessions. So you have to keep moving corners and rearranging corners just to get it to fit. So if you can plan it so it fits within each other, and you're just moving a few around, that's a good way to increase that ball rolling time. So the players spend more time playing and less time sort of sitting out. So they're some of the important factors to it. And then I think the other part of my philosophy, which is like one of my core beliefs, is about the sessions being like individualized. You know, so you're focusing on like the players that you've got in front of you, and catering to their individual needs. You know, it's all about individual development, as well as like a team development, because you want them to be coherent together on the pitch and understand each other, and have this like shared framework so you know what you're doing. But it's that encouragement to let them like stay on the ball and let them experiment for themselves, and to try and dribble past someone, or to make like that progressive pass, to take them risks, to try to be creative with it, and that way you're encouraging your players to be confident and to express themselves, which is like the psychological aspects of it, and trying to make them have fun and enjoy doing it and backing themselves, which I think is very important. You get a lot of players where they're not confident and they don't want the ball, so they hide, they stand behind players, so they can't get the pass, or they pass it to the player who can play, and then the player who can play gets loads of practice because they're always on the ball, and the player who can't practice just keeps kicking it away all the time, which is why the individual development and encouraging them to do that is very important. As I sort of referred to earlier, it's not about staying on the ball all the time. It's about being progressive. Can we get the ball further forward up the field in a controlled manner so that we're in control of the ball and possession, and being threatening with it, getting forward and actually doing what we're supposed to do to try and win, which is like another part of like my playing philosophy that I encourage with like every time I coach, like regardless of age or ability, experience, of that, it is like, we've got the objective, like let's play to that objective. Positive reinforcement, I think I've mentioned that earlier. So for me, it's a matter of like praising them and trying to see like what their intent was. So like even if their forward pass doesn't make it and it gets cut out, the fact that they had the head up and they're seeing that pass and they tried it, it's worth acknowledging and like affirming that, so that the player keeps wanting to take them risks, because they know that they're not going to be judged negatively for it, or that they're not going to be punished for it in some way.
Have you found that getting your thoughts written down and on paper has helped you improve the coach, because you've now got a clearer idea, you've got a framework, and has it also helped you in your mentoring role as well?
I think it's definitely helped in the mentoring, because I've been able to like put all the thoughts down and like be able to like analyze them and try to rearrange them and try and make them fit together. So I think being aware of like all these different thoughts helps. Being able to see it there in front of you and not just loose concepts floating around in your mind that you're trying to like hold on to and not to forget. I think it's helped like that. I think in terms of like getting a model and a framework, it's still a work in progress. It's still trying to make it as concise as possible, so people can remember it, because if you can't remember it, good luck doing it. I think sometimes I even struggle to remember like everything, that I've just went on quite a rant about all the different aspects to it in answer to your question, and I hope I've not forgot anything that's too important within that answer, which can happen if you start rambling, you forgot what you've said and what you haven't. So that I think it's still a work in progress, and trying to get that model that can be shared, once it's concise enough and once all the pieces fit in and it becomes like perfectly comprehensible. But with your thoughts always changing, like with your experiences always changing. It's a live document. It's a living model. It's due to change based on like what the experience is at that time. So it's sort of like that Heraclitus idea for flux, where you can't step into the same river more than once, for new waters are always flowing upon you. I find that's the sort of predicament where I'm in now, where new waters keep flowing on me, and it's hard to get that mental model that I can share with confidence, if that makes sense.
It does, and it leads very well into what will be the last question, because I think we've just gone over an hour now, and I know there's some games on TV that you might want to watch. So just on that state of reflection, really, what is something you would like to have done differently in your coaching journey?
I don't think I'd have really wanted to do anything different, because that sort of, it sounds insulting to like the bit that I'd want to change.
Sure. Is there something that you perhaps maybe didn't appreciate and you would have liked to soak in more? Like, if you, on reflection, it was actually a really good opportunity, and maybe you didn't make the most of it?
Not that I can think of, but I think the one thing that I would have liked to do more of would be, like, as sort of mentioned earlier, to coach more. So, there's periods where, like, as you mentioned earlier, like under 16s, reserves, development team, like all at once, and you're doing several sessions a week, and you're learning loads from it. But then I've also had times where I've only been coaching one team a week, where you're there for like 60 minutes and that's it. At which point, or like maybe like you're an assistant coach, so you don't necessarily like spend that much time delivering. And although you can like work with someone else and like learn from their ideas, you've maybe not got that sort of practical experience of delivering yourself and getting to improve in that way. So I don't think I'd change anything that I'd done, but I think I'd like to add to what I'd done. So like at the times when I was only doing one session a week, I'd have quite liked to have like found another team and do a little bit more. But of course, life often gets in the way of these things with work commitments and whatever.
Yeah, absolutely right. Now, thank you for coming on and talking to us. Thank you for sharing your ideas and your stories. And I'm sure that plenty of people will have a look at your book. Just one more plug. What was it called and where can we find it?
The Soccer Sessions book can be found on Amazon.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Paul. You have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Will. I appreciate it. Have a great evening.
Thanks to Paul for coming on, and thank you for listening. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn and Facebook. We'll keep you updated with latest articles and podcast episodes, and make sure your BFCN subscription is up to date so you can see the latest jobs and member discounts. See you next time.